All right. First and foremost, I just want to do the matchup rundown. I think it's super interesting because we have, so much information on these players now. We have 9 games of each. I think this is where we'll have the biggest disparity for the matchup. And I think that Vitality really becomes fantastic here. I think that Photon, I think he has made a lot of arguments for himself for being the MVP of the regular split. Photon, if you just think back to his Gwen games, his Gnar game against Astralis was insane. His Ornn game was left kind of a lot to the desire, and I think the Renekton game was definitely a hard draft to pull off. But I think without Photon, if they had a regularly performing top laner, I think Vitality wouldn't even be in top 2. A lot of the games where Vitality looked iffy due to rough early games or due to mistakes or off the hands of a rough early game start in the bottom side or bow inting on Vi, I just see Photon being on an absolute mountain. I think that Photon is, whatever champion he plays, he just looks so clean with it. I've been so impressed. It's like, if I want to try to define what makes Photon so damn good, his lane phase is sublime. He doesn't get killed to die to ganks. Like, he doesn't die to ganks. He manages the wave super hard, forces the enemy jungle to fix wave states most of the time. He burns summoners 1v1s, always ready for Rift Herald, always has great conditions for Rift Herald to set up his jungle for success. You guys have no idea how big of an impact that has. In terms of fighting timings and moving timings, he's always there on the right time, finds great flanks and just understands super well the limits of his champions. I think his team fighting has been super crisp. This is like an absolute top lane dream because he's kind of like a, he's like a sleeping tiger, It's like, it's coming. He can't connect with the game so early due to the circumstance of his lane phase, but it's just slowly growing in strength and then finally comes in for your neck and bites you. Right? In contrast to Abby, I think Abby and also Team Heretics, they've tried very hard to fit into I think Team Heretics as a whole have had a very hard time to connect with their side laners in the mid game and the late game in terms of how they can enact their efficiency in terms of how much they farm and how much they do so. I think that Abby has been the player that I kind of expected. I think when he plays the K'Sante, looks fine. I think he has a decent K'Sante, but you can't really pull off the K'Sante trick against Team Vitality, because if you pick K'Sante, you also invite a lot of the great champions that Photon has performed so well against, which is super important. I think that Abby, when he played the Jax, was quite uninteresting. I think that game, was, you could see his CS numbers and in general finding the timings to fight and how he connects is just not on the same level as Photon. And I think that, Abby's problems kind of cement Team Heretics' problems as a whole. I think often they're just drafting these death ball compositions that they want to group up and, kind of hug together. And in that process, Abby is playing his K'Sante and he's going to, be as tanky as possible and participate in these death ball compositions. But other than that, I don't see Abby really putting up a candle here in this matchup, right? And I think it will come down to if Abby can maybe shake things up by playing some more unique champions. But the thing is, even some of the Abby classics like the Urgot or the Tryndamere, it's like I pay attention to Photon solo queue, and these are champions that he's well aware of. I don't think these are the type of curveballs that are necessarily going to give Abby an edge here. So in my mind, heavy favorite in Photon side. I hope that Abby shows us more because the K'Sante looks fine, but the Renekton and the Jax games really left a lot to desire. So it's also one of those things where you can ask yourself, even in the case where K'Sante gets banned, it's like either you pick K'Sante, you invite a lot of the Photon classics, or you ban K'Sante and you have more classics coming at you. Maybe we could see like an Abby Gnar, that could be interesting. And then maybe finally we get to see the test of Photon's Gnar counters. Maybe we get to see the Jace, maybe we get to see a Irelia. You know, this would be super interesting. I would assume that Jax will be permabanned from Team Heretics side. I would be very surprised if it's not. I would be very surprised if the Jax falls into the hands of Photon. In terms of jungle, I think Jankos has been a very big bright spot for Team Heretics. I think that he has very strong early games. I feel like Jankos and Malrang kind of had a very similar issue with their teams in this season, is that they've managed to create circumstances where they find ganks, they find gank timers, but their laners haven't performed well enough to convert that into wins, convert that into dragons, convert that into Rift Heralds, and this is, you know, been a very big pain point for Jankos. You've had some highlight moments for Jankos. I think the Sejuani game that he played, where he just got gank in after gank. I think Jankos has been very clever. I think Jankos, you know, has shown very different sides of himself in this matchup. I think that he dove bot in unison with his team. I think that Jankos has been a very solid player, and I think that he's been the best performer for Team Heretics. On both sides, Bo has been very spicy, crispy, like a knick-knack paddywhack. You know, Bo has been playing super, super good, but the main question is just the last two VI games, right? It's like the last two VI games looked very iffy. It seems like Vitality are quoting that there's been some communication issues, but Bo also overreached. And, you know, something to highlight, right, in terms of how Bo has played, he has gone often for a lot of high-risk plays, and they work, and you're just amazed looking at it. I don't believe that Bo had some lucky streak where everything just went right for him. I don't believe in that, because he replicated his solo queue performance on stage, he replicates it in Champions queue. I think it's just a dip in performance, and I think it's not that big of a deal. I think that all in all, I think Bo is a fantastic player, and I think that still, you know, the jungle is limited to what you can and cannot do. If you think about how jungle connects to the other roles, I think that Bo has better synergy with his top side, mid and top, and I think this is where Bo can definitely create an edge, because I think that Ebi and Ruby are very isolated from the team unless they're grouping up as a death ball. So this is where I believe Bo can find some juice. We move on to the mid lane. You know, you always have the question of an Azir test. You know, it's like there's a lot of crossover here in terms of champions with what the homies has played. You know, I had the single Tristana game, the LB game, Talia, and then you had the Casio game. All in all, I would say that Perkz has played very well in the games against tougher opponents. I think that the most standout games for me in my mind for Perkz was the game against G2 and the game against Mad Lions. And that was their direct competition for being so high up in the standings. I think those were the best performances for Perkz. I think you've seen a couple of mistakes here and there that look kind of uncharacteristic, but I think that, you know, on the topic of Perkz, I think he's the type of player that definitely, you know, will perform better and better as he goes deeper and deeper into the season. I think his Azir has looked good. I think the Rise and in general, I think Vitality, of course, got away with a lot due to Photon's level of play. But I think Perkz definitely has been a top 3 performing mid laner, which is, you know, in a world where mid lane doesn't feel as important as it did in the past, I think that, you know, mid lane has been kind of iffy for us here in Europe. And for me still, you know, you're going to ask yourself who's top performer in my mind. I think Caps has been the best performer. I would pay attention to in this series what happens to Azir, if there's going to be answers into Azir, because I think Azir has been a very big crutch champion for Ruby, because, you know, this champion is hard to gank, scales well, lanes well. I think that Azir is just such a complete champion and doesn't necessarily have any big weaknesses. It's like the big weakness of Azir is that the enemy can pick a champion into it and maybe survive lane, and that champion is going to be super good into your team. But tell me what champion that is not true. You know, every champion has counters and answers, and if the enemy can pick a champion that is going to be good into your composition, you know, that's not necessarily a weakness. That's just you coping, trying to find, you know, something to point out. And you know, you have that Azir Emperor of Shurima stuff. You know, obviously I love Azir, but I am very unbiased here in my opinion. Azir is super strong. Last year as well, nothing has changed with the champion. Good build diversity, and all in all, fantastic champ. I think Azir would be very contested. You see those moments, you know, it's like in terms of the answers to Azir, Kassadin is nerfed on 13.1.B. Very curious if Azir is out, if we're going to see a lot more Orianna on this patch. Orianna is super neat. I think that Orianna buffs are super massive, and I'm curious to see more. But in terms of the changes to champions, I'm very surprised that Jax is untouched. You know, we might see some GP play into Jax, which is interesting. Jungle is relatively the same. Maokai got a little nerf, but I think that increases the power of Sejuani and Elise. Maokai still will be played. I would be very surprised if we are not going to, crack that, you know. I am very excited to see more Orianna. I think that champion will be contested if Azir is going to be banned. I will be very surprised if Azir drops to 4-5 and survives there. Another thing to pay attention to, right, is like, I don't imagine a world where Abby and Ruby are going to be able to play Jace themselves. I think that requires too much precision. I do believe that Jace carries an additional layer of, precision on your head. If you make mistakes with Jace, you're going to have a very hard game. And I think if Jace is the draft that you go for with the Jace Elise, I don't see Vitality as the big monster snowball team. I see them as a very strategic team, and that could be an opening for some of these teams that are slightly worse. But I would love to see some Photon Jace. Would love to see it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, Koi vs SK is the second best of 3 in Group A. I think the main thing is that we shouldn't underestimate the strength of Koi coming into this one. Because something I want to highlight is that Koi is a team that definitely, started off slow, and it's a team that, didn't practice a lot in the off-season. And what I want to highlight right off the bat is this 100% ban rate against Koi Caitlyn. Caitlyn is super strong, and I think this patch is actually really helpful for Comb and Trimby. I think Comb and Trimby are very happy coming into a new patch. And this new patch, even though it doesn't change up things completely, something that I want to give out as a point, as we are watching a lot of these new bot lanes come in, like Exakick and DOS, and Crowny and Labrov specifically, we need to pay attention to their longevity and how meta-proof they're going to be. A very big advantage that some of these bot lanes have is the fact that the meta has been relatively the same for a very long time. So the longer you've practiced, the bigger the edge you're going to have, because all of these matchups are quite figured out and precision is key. In some metas, you're rewarded for having a deeper and wider champion pool. In some metas, you're rewarded for practicing the same things over and over again. So that's going to be a very interesting tidbit to pay attention to when you compare it to some of the players that have shown that they are kind of, meta-proof, and they are capable of playing many different situations. And that's not, of course, to talk bad about SK or BDS's bot lane, not at all. This is just the situation that they've been in, and they haven't had an opportunity to show more, but it's an interesting discussion to bring up. Let's start off in the top lane. Shigenda versus Irrelevant. So Irrelevant is a player that I like a lot. I think he's like the 4th best performing top laner, just below Chasey and Adam and Photon, of course. But I think Irrelevant, what he does good, I think that he finds the right champions to pick for his team, and I think that he finds good ways of contributing in fights, and he's often playing weak side and doesn't find himself in horrible lane situations. He doesn't drag his jungler to fix his wave states, and often he is very, cue the shitty pun, relevant in the games. I think that he is a very effective top laner, and I think that he plays a very important role in the success of Exakick, DOS, and Marcoon. I think that's very good to see. I think that Irrelevant has definitely found his identity on this roster, and I think that's a very powerful tool coming into this one. And I think that's kind of the polar opposite of Shigenda on the other side. He's played a little bit of everything, and I think he's been in a position where his Gnar games look kind of decent. That's a champion that Shigenda's looked good on. He looks self-sufficient, and he's in a world where he's just playing in isolation. That seems perfectly fine. They tried the Jaxes, they tried the Fioras, they tried the GPs, all of those situations where the lane matchups are a little bit more precise and you have to pay attention to so many details in the game. It is a lot harder to make sure that you are there for the timings where it's important and that you control the wave in a way where you don't get punished. You know, you need a lot of finesse and a very, very good understanding of jungle in order to pull off these champions, and this is not where I place Shigenda currently. I think Shigenda is, you know, struggling due to Koi's struggles as a whole. I think that in a team that has no identity, Shigenda has also lacked to find his, and he's kind of explored himself and spread himself too kind of thin, and I think that has put himself in a position where he needs to figure out way too many different things over the span of many different games. So Shigenda is kind of the polar opposite of what Irrelevant has shown, but I have to say, you know, the now games do look decent, and I think that's like the route where he wants to go to. Another thing here is that Shigenda will have a little bit more freedom to, will have a little bit more freedom to breathe in this matchup. I think top lane will be quite isolated in itself. The jungle matchup will be fireworks. I think both of these junglers are going to be very, very centered and focused around level 3 gameplay. Both of these junglers, I put them in a box where Sejuani Elise is going to look super, super good for them. Malrang is an outlier that he finds ways even on Maokai to set up ganks. Even in the game, I believe it was against, might have been G2. I don't know which team it was, sorry, but he got a level 3 gank on mid. You know, Malrang, even though I am very hyped on Malrang. Like in my mind, I think Malrang has had a really strong winter split. Koi hasn't been winning a lot of games, but I think Malrang has found so many ganks that his teammates couldn't convert. I feel like Malrang and Jankos have been in a similar boat in terms of their performances, in terms of what they achieve in the early game, but then his laners just haven't performed enough to convert. That is where Larsen has been weak. That's when Comp and Trimby has been weak. The main thing that Koi's identity was last year was that Malrang sacrificed everything in order to get his teammates ahead and live deep in the brains of his opponents. And what Koi did good was that Larsen, Comp, Trimby, and also Odo Amne converted lane leads into bigger leads. And they played very consistent and they didn't give anything away. Now, I feel like Larsen throws away a lot of leads. Bot lane as well has been not so precise, die 2v2 a lot, and have kind of struggled to find an identity in this meta, right? And this is where it's been rough. But I think Malrang has been a massive strength for Koi, and in my mind, if I rate the junglers of the split, I would put Elioya first, I would put Bo second, and then I would put Malrang on third. And a lot of people are gonna come to me with Sheo and Markoon. The main thing for Sheo for me is that on Wukong, he looks really, really insane. Wukong is by far his strongest champion. On some of the other champs, I think that I desire a little bit more, right? And Markoon, I think that Seju, Elise, I think it's been fantastic. And then, of course, people are going to talk about Yike. I think Yike also has been looking strong. It's just that in my mind, I value the traits that Malrang, Bo, and Elioya bring to the table. And now, comparing the bottom sides, you know, the main thing here that sticks out to me, right, is, as mentioned before, it's like banned against Koi, Caitlyn. So this is going to be heavily contested, it's going to be banned. I would imagine the Lucian also gets banned and Ashe also gets banned. And this is where the pool opens up. When Yuumi is out, so you have Yuumi out because she's completely deleted of the map. Lucian, Ashe, Caitlyn, these champions most of the time will get banned. I think, for example, if Koi is on blue side, I think they ban Lucian on blue and then they first pick Ashe over Kate as an example. Or just pick Kate over Ashe, that could be something. And I think Koi is very happy there. So I think if you are on red side, you have to think about banning Caitlyn and Ashe. I think it's going to be super important. And then we have to think about how the bot lane pool is going to evolve. And then the question there, with those bans, with Yuumi out, Caitlyn out, Ashe out, Lucian out, this opens up for the likes of Comp Kalista. Comp Kalista can be very interesting. And then you have the situation where Exaking and DOS have found a lot of success playing the Yuumi matchups, the Lucian matchups. They've been very, very sharp, crazy strong, crazy good in these matchups. But what happens when these champions are out? Kalista gets invited. Can Exekick pull up a Draven? Are we going to see Zeri Lulu into Sivir? Then I would say I will favor SK. If the matchup is going to be a little bit different and more volatile, and Trimby can kind of show off his skill in terms of playing many champions instead of really being hyper-focused on a few, and then, Comp can show off his Kalista, I think that could be very, very interesting. The question is, how is the bot lane, meta going to land after these champions are banned? We saw what 13-1 beef, Lycos versus 100 Thieves. What 100 Thieves busted out was Zayara Khan when Lucian, Zeri, Caitlyn and Ashe were out. That was a good look. And then the answer was Kaiser Nautilus. Those are the situations where Exekick will have to go deeper, those will have to go deeper, and this is where Comp and Trimby are very experienced. They played the likes of Ezreal Karma, they played the likes of Kalista, they played many different lanes, and this is where things get interesting, right? If the matchups are as always, and bans don't happen, and we have matchups that we recognize, for example, Lucian Nami versus Lulu, I think that SK are going to do better in those. And the main question for me is, I think that Caitlyn ban will continue, I think the Ashe ban on red side will also continue, and then I think Lucian will be out. I think that Koi should really look to ban Lucian on blue side. I don't think they should invite any Lucian Nami champ trades. I don't think they should look to invite any Lulu into Lucian matchups either. I think there's going to be a weakness for them. And then the question will be how will Koi maneuver around red side. In terms of gameplay, I think SK, they've had some sloppy games here and there, but way less sloppy than what Koi has shown. Koi has definitely ramped up and they've done better and better, but the main issues for Koi is still they need to find their identity on the patch. SK have really, really good clarity on how they want to draft. I can really see their idea and their identity in the terms of how they approach the game. They've got a good vibe going on. I think that their players have very clear strengths, and I think that's super exciting for SK. But in regards to Koi, this is a team that definitely, if they figure out what they want to play in bot, and Larson doesn't die to as many ganks, Shigenda and Irrelevant, they're going to be in isolation. That's going to be cool. He just needs to connect with the game. I think that Koi definitely can research here. I'm going to lean towards SK due to what they've shown, but you have to keep in mind with the format change, now teams have a lot more time to practice. They have a lot more time to practice and they can focus in on one opponent. Super important. The fact that you can focus in on one opponent at a time means that you can adjust your draft for it, you can practice towards it, and you will have a lot more breathing room to actually improve as a team. The BO3 format, the BO1 format with the super weeks, you have 3 days of practice and then you have to prepare against each enemy on the day. It's very exhausting, and you don't get to fine-tune a spear that's specifically designed to stick into the back of your next opponent, right? It's very different, the best of 3 format. And this is where SK will be tested, I think that the main question will, how will the bot lane situation land? Because I think Comp and Trimby have a very deep champion pool. What's going to happen to Exekick and DOS when a lot of those comfort picks are out of the picture? This is going to be a true test for Exekick and DOS. I think this is one of the closer best of 3 matchups we have in the first round. I'm going to lean towards SK. I think it's only natural. Koi has shown some, issues in terms of connecting and some issues in terms of lane phase, both mid and bot and top. We're going to see fireworks level 3. I'm going to expect that SK come in here following their strict identity, but don't sleep on Koi, guys. I think Koi, they are very strong players. I think that they can definitely research. Eyes on Malrang and Trimby and how they make the game as simple as possible to play for their teammates, and how Comp and Trimby figure out the bot lane matchups. We shall see how it pans out for them.